Margaret Chen wiped down the counter for what felt like the 1,000th time that morning. The cloth moved in small circles across the worn surface, following a pattern she had repeated for 37 years. Her hands knew every scratch, every stain, every spot where the chrome had dulled with age. She did not need to think about it anymore. It was just something her body did, like breathing. The morning rush had ended. The diner was quiet now except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of cups. 3 customers sat in the booths by the window. Old regulars. People she knew as well as her own family. Better than her own family if she was being honest with herself. Rosie's Diner had been her second home since 1988. She was 25 when she first tied on the apron. She was 62 now. The years had passed like water flowing downstream, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always moving in one direction. She could not stop them. She could not go back. The diner looked exactly the same as it did when she started. Red vinyl booths that squeaked when people sat down. Chrome edges that reflected the fluorescent lights above. A black and white checkered floor that she had mopped more times than she could count. The menu had not changed much either. Eggs, toast, pancakes, burgers, pie. Simple food for simple people. That was what the owner, Mr. Patterson, always said. Margaret liked the sameness of it all. She liked knowing what to expect. She liked that Tuesday always felt like Tuesday and Friday always felt like Friday. Her life had enough surprises already. She did not need any more. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 8:15. Frank would be here soon. He always arrived at 8:30, right after his morning walk. He always sat in the third booth on the left. He always ordered 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and black coffee. He had been doing this for 12 years, ever since his wife died. Margaret picked up the coffee pot and walked over to fill the cups of the other customers. Mrs. Henderson sat in the corner booth, reading a magazine through thick glasses. She was 83 and lived alone in a house 2 blocks away. She came to the diner every morning because she said her house was too quiet. Mr. Walsh sat at the counter working on a crossword puzzle. He was 79 and had taught math at the high school for 40 years. Now he spent his mornings here, his pencil moving slowly across the newspaper, his coffee growing cold beside him. Tom and Betty Russo sat together in their usual booth, not talking much, just being together. They had been married for 56 years. They held hands while they ate. Margaret thought that was nice. These were her people. The old ones who came every morning. The ones who had nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. The ones who needed the diner as much as she did. Maybe more. She poured their coffee and they thanked her. They always thanked her, even though she had been pouring their coffee for years. Good manners never got old, Mrs. Henderson liked to say. Margaret returned to the counter and set down the coffee pot. She looked around the diner. Everything was in its place. Everything was as it should be. But something felt different today. She could not explain it. It was just a feeling in her chest like something was waiting to happen. The bell above the door chimed. Frank walked in, moving slowly with his cane. He was 81 years old, with white hair and deep wrinkles around his eyes. He had been a soldier once, a long time ago. He fought in a war that most young people did not even learn about in school anymore. He never talked about it much. He just came here every morning, ate his breakfast, and sometimes he told Margaret stories about his wife. "Roast, dear, good morning, Frank," Margaret said, already reaching for a coffee cup. "Morning, Margaret," Frank replied. His voice was rough like gravel, but his smile was gentle. He made his way to his usual booth and sat down with a small grunt. His knees bothered him. Everything bothered him these days, he once told her. Getting old was not for the weak. Margaret brought him his coffee without asking. She knew how he liked it. Black, no sugar. She set it down in front of him carefully. "The usual?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "The usual," Frank confirmed. Margaret nodded and turned to put in his order, but Frank spoke again, stopping her. "You know what today is?" he asked. Margaret turned back to him. "Tuesday?" Frank shook his head slowly. "It's Rose's birthday. She would have been 80 today." Margaret felt her heart squeeze. She had heard many stories about Rose over the years. Rose who loved gardening. Rose who made the best apple pie. Rose who sang while she did the dishes. Rose who had been gone for 12 years but was still here in every word Frank spoke. "I'm sorry, Frank," Margaret said softly. Frank waved his hand. "Don't be sorry. I like remembering her. Especially today. He paused, looking down at his coffee. She used to play the piano, you know. Every evening after dinner. Just simple songs. Nothing fancy. But it made the house feel like a home. Margaret nodded. She did not know what to say. She was not good with words when people were sad. I miss that sound, Frank continued. I miss hearing her play. Sometimes I try to remember the melodies, but they slip away from me, like water through my fingers. He looked up at Margaret then, and she saw something in his eyes that made her chest hurt. It was loneliness. Deep and endless loneliness. I'd give anything to hear those songs again, Frank said quietly. Margaret stood there, holding her order pad, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to help him. She wanted to bring back those sounds for him. But she could not. She was just a waitress. What could she do? She turned away to put in his order, but her eyes caught something in the corner of the diner. The piano, the old upright piano that had been sitting there for as long as she could remember, longer than she had been working here. Nobody ever played it. It was just part of the furniture, like the booths and the counter. It gathered dust and held up a fake plant in a plastic pot. Margaret stared at the piano. She had not thought about that instrument in years. She had not thought about music in years. She had locked that part of herself away a long time ago, in a box in the back of her mind where old dreams went to die. But now, looking at Frank's sad eyes and hearing about his wife's songs, something stirred inside her. Something she thought was dead. Margaret had studied piano once, a lifetime ago, when she was young and the world was full of possibilities. She had been good too. Really good. Good enough to audition for Juilliard. Good enough to make it to the final round. Good enough to almost have a different life. But then life happened. She met David. She fell in love. She got pregnant at 22. They got married quickly. She had a baby girl, then a boy 2 years later. David worked at the factory. She worked at the diner. They needed the money. There was no time for piano. No time for dreams. The years passed. The kids grew up. David left her for a younger woman when she was 43. The kids moved away for college and never really came back. And Margaret kept working at the diner, kept wiping down counters, kept pouring coffee, kept living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She had not touched a piano in 25 years. Maybe 30. She could not remember exactly. The piano in her apartment was covered with a sheet. It was buried under boxes of old photographs and winter clothes. She walked past it every day and did not see it anymore. But now, standing in the diner, looking at that dusty old upright in the corner, she wondered if her fingers would still remember, if the music was still inside her somewhere. Margaret, Frank's voice brought her back. You okay? She blinked and looked at him. Yes, sorry, I'll get your order in. She walked to the kitchen window and called out his order to Joey, the cook. Joey had been working here almost as long as she had. He was a man of few words, which Margaret appreciated. He just nodded and started cooking. Margaret should have gone back to her work, should have wiped down more tables, should have refilled the salt shakers, should have done any of the 100 small tasks that filled her day. But instead, she found herself walking toward the piano. Her heart beat faster with each step. What was she doing? She could not just play the piano in the middle of her shift. Mr. Patterson would not like it. The customers would think she was crazy. She was being ridiculous. But her feet kept moving. She reached the piano and stood in front of it. Up close, she could see the scratches in the wood. The keys were yellow with age. Dust covered everything. The fake plant on top looked sad and plastic. Slowly, carefully, Margaret moved the plant aside. She set it on the floor. Then she pulled out the bench. It scraped against the floor, making a loud sound that made Mrs. Henderson look up from her magazine. Margaret sat down on the bench. It was hard and uncomfortable. The height was wrong, but she did not adjust it. She just sat there staring at the keys. Her hands trembled as she lifted them. She had not felt nervous in years. She forgot what it felt like. This fluttering in her stomach, this tightness in her throat. What if she could not do it anymore? What if the music was gone? What if she had waited too long? She placed her fingers on the keys. They felt cool and smooth. Foreign and familiar at the same time, the diner was quiet now. She could feel everyone watching her. Mr. Walsh had put down his crossword puzzle. Tom and Betty had stopped eating. Mrs. Henderson had taken off her glasses. Frank was leaning forward in his booth. Margaret closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, and then she pressed down on the keys. The first notes were shaky, uncertain. The piano was badly out of tune. Some keys stuck, others made strange sounds. But Margaret kept playing. Her fingers found the melody. A simple song. A song her grandmother had taught her when she was 7 years old. A gentle waltz that her grandmother said came from the old country. From a place and time that did not exist anymore. The music filled the diner, soft and sweet and sad. It floated through the air like morning light through a window, like a memory coming back to life. Margaret kept her eyes closed and played. Her fingers remembered what her mind had forgotten. They moved across the keys with a grace she did not know she still had. The years fell away. For a moment, she was not a 62-year-old waitress with tired feet and an empty apartment. She was young again, full of hope again, full of music again. When she finished, there was silence, complete silence. Margaret opened her eyes slowly. She was afraid to look, afraid to see disappointment or confusion on the faces of the customers. But when she turned around, she saw something she did not expect. Frank was crying. Tears ran down his weathered face, dripping onto the table. He made no sound. He just sat there crying with his hands pressed flat on the table. Mrs. Henderson had tears in her eyes, too. She was smiling, but crying. Mr. Walsh was staring at Margaret with his mouth slightly open, his crossword puzzle forgotten. Tom and Betty were holding hands even tighter, both of them looking misty. "My mother used to sing that," Frank said finally, his voice breaking. "I was a boy, maybe 5 or 6. She would sing that while she hung laundry. I had forgotten. I had completely forgotten, but just now, hearing you play, it all came back." Margaret did not know what to say. She stood up from the piano bench, feeling suddenly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I should get back to work. Your breakfast is probably ready." But Frank shook his head. "Don't apologize. That was beautiful. That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years." Mrs. Henderson spoke up from her corner booth. "My husband used to play something like that. On his accordion. At our wedding." Her voice was soft and full of wonder. "I thought I had forgotten how it sounded. But I haven't. It's still there." Margaret felt something wet on her own cheeks. She reached up and realized she was crying too. She could not remember the last time she cried. Not when David left. Not when her mother died. Not when her daughter stopped calling. But now, standing in the middle of this old diner, she was crying. Joey's voice came from the kitchen window. "Order up!" The spell broke. Margaret wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. "I need to get back to work," she said again. She brought Frank his breakfast. Her hands were still shaking slightly. He looked up at her with something new in his eyes, something that looked like hope. "Would you play again tomorrow?" he asked. Margaret hesitated. "I don't know. I really shouldn't. Mr. Patterson might not like it." "I'll talk to him," Frank said firmly. "That music, it brought something back, something I thought I lost forever." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Margaret went through her usual routine, but nothing felt usual anymore. The customers kept looking at her differently. They kept smiling at her. Mrs. Henderson even squeezed her hand when she refilled her coffee. When her shift ended at 2 o'clock, Margaret walked home in a daze. She lived in a small apartment above a drugstore, 3 blocks from the diner. The same apartment she had lived in for 19 years since the divorce. She climbed the narrow stairs and unlocked her door. The apartment was dim and quiet. It always was. She turned on a lamp and looked around. At the worn couch, at the TV that was too old to get good reception, at the kitchen table where she ate dinner alone every night, and then she looked at the corner. At the piano buried under boxes and covered with a sheet. Slowly, Margaret walked over to it. She started moving boxes, one by one. They were heavy and full of things she never looked at. Old photo albums, Christmas decorations she never used, clothes that did not fit anymore. She pulled off the sheet. Dust flew everywhere, making her cough. The piano looked even worse than the one at the diner. The wood was scratched. The keys were yellow. It probably had not been tuned in 20 years, but it was hers. It had been her mother's before that. It was the piano she learned on. The piano she practiced on for hours every day when she was young. The piano she played when she got her acceptance letter from Juilliard. The piano that had been silent for so long. Margaret sat down and played a single note. It sounded terrible, completely out of tune. But it was sound. It was music. It was possibility. She thought about Frank's face, about his tears, about how a simple melody had brought back a memory he thought was lost forever. She thought about Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Walsh and how they had all looked at her with those soft, grateful eyes. Maybe she could do this again. Maybe it was not too late. Maybe the music was not dead after all. Margaret placed both hands on the keys and began to play. The next morning, Margaret woke up before her alarm. This never happened. She was usually the kind of person who hit snooze 3 times and dragged herself out of bed. But today her eyes opened at 5 in the morning and she was wide awake. Her fingers hurt. They were not used to playing piano anymore. The muscles were stiff and sore, but it was a good kind of pain. It reminded her that yesterday really happened. It was not a dream. She made coffee and sat by her window watching the sun come up. The street below was empty except for a stray cat walking along the sidewalk. Everything was quiet and peaceful. Margaret liked this time of day. Before the world woke up and started making noise, she thought about what Frank had asked her, to play again today. She had not given him an answer. She told him she would think about it. But the truth was, she had already decided. She wanted to play again. She needed to play again. Something had woken up inside her yesterday, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. And now that it was awake, she did not think she could put it back to sleep. Margaret got dressed and walked to the diner. She arrived at 5:30, half an hour earlier than usual. Mr. Patterson was already there, counting money in the back office. He was a short, round man with glasses and very little hair. He had owned the diner for 23 years. He was not a bad boss, just tired. Like everyone else. "You're early," he said when he saw her. "I know," Margaret replied. She stood in the doorway of his office, twisting her hands together. "Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you something." He looked up from his counting. "What is it?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Yesterday I played the piano during my break, the old one in the corner, and the customers really liked it. Frank asked me if I would play again today. I was wondering if that would be okay with you." Mr. Patterson stared at her for a moment. "You played the piano?" "Yes." "That old thing in the corner?" "Yes." "And people liked it?" "Yes." Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Margaret, you've worked here for 37 years. In all that time, you never once played that piano. I forgot it even worked." "I forgot too," Margaret said quietly. "Why now?" he asked. Margaret thought about how to answer. Because Frank was sad. Because he missed his wife. Because I wanted to help. And when I played, something happened. Something good. I saw it in their faces. Mr. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Then he put his glasses back on and looked at her. "How long would you play? I can't have you taking long breaks. We have a business to run." 15 minutes, Margaret said quickly. "Just 15 minutes. During the slow time after the morning rush, it won't affect my work." "I promise," Mr. Patterson sighed. "Fine, but if it causes problems, you stop." "Understood?" "Understood," Margaret said. She felt a smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson," he waved her away. "Go get ready for the breakfast rush." Margaret practically floated into the kitchen. Joey was already there, starting the grill. He looked at her suspiciously. "You look happy," he said. "That's weird," Margaret laughed. She could not remember the last time she laughed at work. "I'm going to play the piano again today." Joey raised an eyebrow. "That was you yesterday? I heard something, but I thought the radio was on." "It was me," Margaret confirmed. Joey shrugged and went back to his cooking. "Well, it sounded nice. Better than the radio." The morning rush started. Margaret fell into her usual rhythm, taking orders, pouring coffee, serving plates of eggs and bacon and pancakes. The diner filled up with the regular crowd. Construction workers on their way to job sites. Truck drivers stopping for breakfast. A few families with young children. But today there were also new faces. People Margaret had never seen before. Older people. They came in slowly, walking with canes or holding on to their spouses for support. They looked around the diner like they were searching for something. One woman, who looked about 75, came up to Margaret at the counter. "Excuse me, dear. I heard that someone plays piano here in the mornings. Is that true?" Margaret was surprised. "Yes, I'm going to play at 8:15. After the morning rush, the woman's face lit up. Oh, wonderful. My friend told me about it. She was here yesterday. She said it was beautiful. Thank you, Margaret said. She felt her cheeks getting warm. More older people kept coming. By 8 o'clock, the diner was more crowded than Margaret had ever seen it during a weekday morning. All the booths were full. People were sitting at the counter. Some were even standing, waiting for tables. Mr. Patterson came out of his office and looked around with wide eyes. What is going on? He asked Margaret. I think they came for the music, Margaret said. All these people came just to hear you play piano for 15 minutes? I guess so. Mr. Patterson shook his head in disbelief. Well, they better order something. This is still a diner, not a concert hall. But the people did order. They ordered coffee and pastries and full breakfasts. The kitchen could barely keep up. Joey was sweating over the grill, flipping eggs as fast as he could. Margaret rushed from table to table, taking orders and delivering food. Frank arrived at his usual time. But today his booth was taken. An elderly couple sat there, holding hands and looking around excitedly. Frank stood near the door, looking uncertain. Margaret hurried over to him. Frank, I'm so sorry. We're packed today. Let me find you a seat. It's fine, Frank said. But he looked disappointed. Margaret looked around frantically. Every seat was taken. Then she had an idea. Wait here for just a minute. She went to the back and grabbed a folding chair from the storage room. She set it up near the piano and brought Frank over to it. Best seat in the house, she said with a smile. Frank's face brightened. Thank you, Margaret. By 8:15, the diner was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was waiting. All eyes were on Margaret. She felt nervous again. Yesterday she had played on impulse. She had not thought about it. But now with all these people watching, expecting something, she felt the pressure. What if she was not good enough? What if she disappointed them? But then she looked at Frank sitting in his folding chair with his cane across his lap. She looked at all the other faces. Old faces, lined with years and memories. Faces that looked hopeful, hungry for something they could not name. Margaret sat down at the piano. She took a deep breath, and she began to play. She played the same song as yesterday, the waltz her grandmother taught her. Her fingers were sore, but they remembered. The notes came easier today, more smooth, more sure. When she finished the first song, there was silence. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. The sound filled the diner like thunder. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. She had not expected that. She had not expected applause. She was just a waitress playing an out-of-tune piano. More, someone called out, an old man in the back booth. Please play more. Margaret looked at the clock. She still had 10 minutes. She looked at Mr. Patterson, who was standing by the cash register with his arms crossed. He gave her a small nod. She played another song. Then another. Simple melodies. Songs from long ago. Songs her grandmother played. Songs her mother hummed while cooking dinner. Songs that felt like home. She played a folk tune that her father used to sing. She played a hymn she learned in church as a child. She played Beautiful Dreamer and Scarborough Fair and Greensleeves. Old songs, songs that had been around for 100 years or more. With each song, she watched the faces in the diner change. She saw people close their eyes and smile. She saw people reach for their spouse's hands. She saw tears. She saw joy. She saw something she could only describe as peace. When the 15 minutes were up, Margaret stopped playing. Her fingers ached, but it was the best kind of ache. The ache of being used for something meaningful. The applause was louder this time. People stood up. They clapped and clapped. Some of them wiped their eyes. Margaret stood and gave a small bow. She felt foolish but also proud. Same time tomorrow? Frank called out. Same time tomorrow, Margaret confirmed. The crowd began to leave, but slowly. They lingered over their coffee. They talked quietly to each other. Margaret heard snippets of conversation as she cleared tables. That song reminded me of my mother. I haven't heard that melody in 50 years. I feel like I'm young again. One woman stopped Margaret as she walked by with a tray of dirty dishes. Thank you, the woman said. She looked about 80. Her eyes were bright with tears. My husband had Alzheimer's. He forgot almost everything in the last years. But he never forgot the songs from when he was young. Music was the only thing that brought him back to me, even for just a moment. What you're doing here, it's special. Don't ever stop. Margaret did not know what to say. She just nodded and squeezed the woman's hand. The rest of the day passed quickly. Word spread even faster. By lunchtime, the local newspaper had called. They wanted to do a story. A reporter showed up at 1 o'clock with a camera. "I heard you're the famous singing waitress," the young man said. He looked about 25. "Too young to understand I don't sing," Margaret corrected him. "I play piano, and I'm not famous." "Well, you're getting famous," the reporter said. "This story is all over social media. Someone posted a video of you playing yesterday. It has thousands of views." Margaret felt a cold chill run through her. "A video? Who posted a video?" "I don't know. Some granddaughter of one of your customers. She wrote that you made her grandfather cry happy tears. People are eating it up. Can I ask you a few questions?" Margaret wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him to leave. This was getting too big, too fast. She was just a waitress. She just wanted to play a little music for some lonely old people. She did not want to be famous. She did not want attention. But Mr. Patterson was standing nearby, listening, and he was smiling. "This is good for business, Margaret. We should do the interview." So Margaret answered the reporter's questions. Where did she learn to play? Why did she start playing at the diner? What songs does she play? How does it feel to make people so happy? She answered as best she could. But the whole time she felt uncomfortable, like she was pretending to be someone she was not. The reporter took photos of her standing by the piano, of her in her waitress uniform, of the diner. Then he left, saying the story would run in tomorrow's paper. That evening, Margaret went home exhausted. Her feet hurt. Her fingers hurt. Her head hurt from all the questions and attention. She made herself a simple dinner of soup and bread. She ate in front of the television, but she was not really watching. Her phone rang. She almost did not answer. She was too tired. But she looked at the screen and saw it was her daughter, Lisa. They had not spoken in 3 months. "Hello?" Margaret answered. "Mom." "Oh my God, Mom. You're on the internet." Lisa's voice was loud and excited. "My friend sent me a video." "It's you, playing piano at the diner. Why didn't you tell me you were doing this?" Margaret rubbed her forehead. "It just started yesterday, Lisa. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" "Mom, the video has like 2 million views. People are sharing it everywhere. They're calling you the piano waitress. This is amazing. 2 million views." Margaret felt dizzy. That can't be right. I'm looking at it right now. Let me read you some of the comments. This one says, "I'm crying at work right now." This one says, "My grandmother would have loved this." Oh, here's a good one. "This is what pure joy looks like." "Mom, people love you." Margaret did not know what to say. This was all too much, too fast, too big. "Mom, are you there?" Lisa asked. "I'm here," Margaret said quietly. "This is so great. I'm so proud of you. You should have kept playing all these years. You were always so good at piano." "Life got in the way," Margaret said. She tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "Well, life is making up for it now," Lisa said. "Listen, I have to go, but I'll call you tomorrow. I want to hear all about this." "Love you, Mom." "Love you too," Margaret said. But Lisa had already hung up. Margaret sat in her quiet apartment, holding her phone. She thought about what Lisa said. 2 million views. People sharing her video all over the world. Strangers watching her play piano. Strangers talking about her. She did not know how to feel about it. Part of her was scared. Part of her was overwhelmed. But a small part of her, a part she did not want to admit existed, was proud. For the first time in a very long time, people noticed her, not as a waitress who served their coffee, but as someone who made something beautiful, something meaningful. Margaret got ready for bed, but before she turned off the light, she went to her piano. She sat down and played quietly, just for herself. No audience, no cameras, no pressure, just music, simple and pure, the way it was supposed to be. Outside her window, the street was dark and empty, but inside her small apartment, there was light. There was sound. There was something new growing, something that felt like hope. Margaret did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know how big this thing would get. But for now, in this moment, she just played, and that was enough. Margaret did not sleep well that night. She kept thinking about the video. 2 million people watching her. 2 million strangers seeing her face, hearing her play. It made her stomach feel tight and uncomfortable. She got up at 4 in the morning and made coffee. She tried not to, but she could not help herself. She opened her phone and searched for the video. It was easy to find. Right there on the first page. The thumbnail showed her sitting at the piano, her back to the camera. The title read, Waitress plays simple melody that makes everyone cry. Margaret hit play. The video was shaky. Someone had filmed it on their phone holding it sideways. She could hear the sounds of the diner in the background. Cups clinking, people breathing. And then her music. The waltz. It sounded thin and scratchy through the phone's speaker, but she could still hear the melody clearly. The camera moved to show Frank's face. And there they were. The tears, running down his weathered cheeks. His eyes closed. His hands pressed flat on the table. He looked like he was praying. Or remembering. Or both. The video was only 2 minutes long, but it had been viewed 2.3 million times. The numbers kept changing as Margaret watched. 2.4 million, 2.5 million. Going up and up, she scrolled through the comments. There were thousands of them. This is the most beautiful thing I've seen all year. I lost my grandmother last month. This song sounds like something she would have played. I'm sobbing. Why does this hit so hard? I don't even know these people, but I'm crying. We need more of this in the world. Just simple, beautiful moments in that old man's face. That's pure emotion. Pure memory. I'm 76 and this brought back my childhood in one song. Margaret kept scrolling. The comments went on forever. People from all over the world. Different languages. Different countries. All saying similar things. All feeling the same way. She closed her phone and set it down. Her hands were shaking. This was bigger than she ever imagined. This was not just about Frank or Mrs. Henderson or the other regulars at the diner. This had become something else entirely. Margaret did not know if she was ready for this. She arrived at the diner at 5:30, but there were already people waiting outside. A line of people, mostly older people with gray hair and canes and walkers. They stood in the cold morning air, waiting for the doors to open. Mr. Patterson was inside, staring out the window at the line. He looked pale. Margaret, he said when she came in, look at this. Look at all these people. I see them, Margaret said quietly. We can't fit all these people in here. The fire code says we can only have 45 people max. There are at least 70 people out there. Maybe more. Margaret looked out the window again. He was right. The line stretched down the sidewalk and around the corner. She could not even see the end of it. What do we do? She asked. Mr. Patterson ran his hand over his bald head. I don't know. I've never dealt with anything like this. Maybe we should cancel. Tell people you're not playing today. No, Margaret said firmly. The word surprised her. She was not usually so direct. These people came here for something. They need something. We can't turn them away. But we can't fit them all, Mr. Patterson protested. Then we let in as many as we can. And I'll play. And the others will have to come back another day. Mr. Patterson looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. When did you get so stubborn? I've always been stubborn, Margaret said. I just never had a reason to show it before. At 6 o'clock, they opened the doors. The crowd moved in slowly, patiently. They filled every booth, every chair at the counter. They stood along the walls. They squeezed into corners. Mr. Patterson stopped counting after 50 people. This is a fire hazard, he muttered. But he did not kick anyone out. Margaret rushed to take orders. But it was impossible. There were too many people. Joey was overwhelmed in the kitchen. The grill could not keep up. The coffee pot emptied as fast as she could refill it. A woman who looked about 70 raised her hand from a booth. Excuse me, dear. We don't need food. We just came for the music. We can just have coffee. Other people nodded. Yes, just coffee. We're fine with coffee. We don't want to cause trouble, it helped. A little. Margaret poured coffee until her arm ached. She lost count of how many pots she made. She lost count of how many cups she filled. Frank arrived at 8 o'clock. He took one look at the crowd and laughed. Well, Margaret, looks like your secret is out. I guess so, Margaret said. She felt overwhelmed, lost in the noise and the crowd and the pressure of all these expectations. At 8:15, she sat down at the piano. The diner went silent immediately. All those people packed in tight, not making a sound. Just waiting. Just hoping Margaret played. The same songs as yesterday. The waltz. The folk songs. The old hymns. Her fingers moved across the keys and the music filled the room. She watched the faces. Some people closed their eyes. Some people cried. Some people smiled with an expression that looked like relief. like they had been holding their breath for years and could finally let it out. After 15 minutes, she stopped. The applause was deafening. It scared her a little, so much noise in such a small space. People clapped and clapped. Some of them shouted, "Bravo!" Others whistled. Margaret stood and gave a small bow. Then she went back to work. There were dishes to clear, coffee to pour, bills to tally. But throughout the day, people kept coming. Not just old people now. Reporters, photographers, people with cameras and microphones. They all wanted to talk to her, to ask her questions, to take her picture. One reporter was from a television station. She had perfect hair and perfect makeup and very white teeth. "Margaret Chen, you're an overnight sensation. How does it feel?" Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm just a waitress. I play a little piano. That's all. But you've touched millions of people. Your video is everywhere. People are calling you inspiring. They're calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero," Margaret said firmly. "I just play some songs for people who like old music. That's all this is." The reporter smiled like she knew something Margaret did not. "It's much more than that. You've started a movement. People all over the country are sharing stories about music and memory, about how songs from their childhood bring back feelings they thought they'd lost. You've reminded people that simple things can be powerful." Margaret did not know what to say to that. She excused herself and went to refill someone's coffee. But the reporter followed her with the camera. "Margaret, would you ever consider making an album? Or doing concerts? People want more from you." "I work here," Margaret said. "This is my job. I play piano for 15 minutes a day. That's all I can do." The reporter pressed on. "But don't you want to share your gift with more people? Don't you want to reach a bigger audience?" Margaret stopped walking. She turned to face the reporter. "You don't understand. This isn't about reaching people. This isn't about being famous or making albums. This is about Frank, and Mrs. Henderson, and Mr. Walsh, and all the other people who come here every morning because they're lonely or sad or just need something to hold on to. I play for them, not for millions of people on the internet, not for television cameras. For them." The reporter blinked. For a moment, her perfect smile faltered. Then she recovered. "That's beautiful. Can we use that in the segment?" Margaret sighed. "Do whatever you want. I have to get back to work." The television story aired that evening. Margaret did not watch it. But other people did. And they told her about it. Her phone rang all night. Lisa called again. Her son Michael called for the first time in 6 months. Old friends she had not spoken to in years called. Everyone wanted to tell her they saw her on TV. Margaret turned off her phone and went to bed early. She was exhausted. Not just physically, emotionally. She felt like she was being pulled in 100 directions. Everyone wanted something from her. Everyone had an opinion about what she should do next, but nobody asked her what she wanted. The next morning there were even more people waiting outside the diner. The line went around 2 blocks. Mr. Patterson was frantic. "We can't do this," he said. "We just can't. The other businesses are complaining. The line is blocking their doors." The mayor's office called. "They're worried about traffic and safety." Margaret looked at all the faces waiting outside. Old faces, young faces, hopeful faces. "What if we do it outside?" she suggested. "Outside?" Mr. Patterson repeated. "The piano. We could move it outside. Set it up on the sidewalk. Then everyone can hear. No fire codes. No crowding." Mr. Patterson thought about it. "The piano is heavy. Joey can help move it. And some of the customers. People will help if we ask," and they did. 4 strong men from the crowd helped carry the old piano out to the sidewalk. They set it up right in front of the diner. Margaret brought out the bench. It was cold outside. October mornings were chilly. Margaret could see her breath in the air. But she sat down at the piano anyway. The crowd gathered around. There were at least 200 people now, maybe more. They filled the sidewalk and spilled into the street. Some cars had to go around them. Margaret looked at all those faces. All those people who had come just to hear her play. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but also something else. Something that felt like purpose. She began to play. The same songs, but they sounded different outside. The notes floated up into the open air instead of bouncing off walls. The sound carried further. People down the street stopped to listen. Store owners came out of their shops. Cars slowed down. Margaret played for 20 minutes instead of 15. Her fingers were numb from the cold, but she kept going. When she finished, the applause echoed off the buildings. It sounded like thunder rolling through the streets. A man pushed his way through the crowd. He was younger, maybe 50, with gray at his temples and kind eyes. "Miss Chen? I'm Dr. Robert Williams. I'm a music therapist at the university. May I speak with you for a moment?" Margaret was tired. She wanted to go inside and warm up. But something in his face made her pause. He looked serious, important. "Okay," she said. They stepped aside, away from the crowd. Dr. Williams spoke quickly. "What you're doing here is extraordinary. Do you understand the science behind it?" Margaret shook her head. "I just play songs. Old songs." "It's much more than that," Dr. Williams said. "The songs you're playing, they're from the 1930s, 40s, 50s. For people over 70, that's the music of their childhood, their youth. And music from our youth is encoded in our brains differently than other memories. It's tied to emotion, to identity, to our sense of self." Margaret listened, trying to understand. "For people with dementia or Alzheimer's," Dr. Williams continued, "music is often the last thing they remember. When everything else is gone, the songs remain. What you're doing, playing these simple melodies, you're giving these people access to parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. You're bringing back their memories, their feelings, their youth." Margaret felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "I didn't know that." "I don't think you need to know it," Dr. Williams said gently. "You're doing it instinctively. You're choosing the right songs, playing them the right way. Simple, pure, unadorned, it's perfect." "Why are you telling me this?" Margaret asked. "Because I think you could help more people. I run a music therapy program at the hospital. We work with elderly patients, particularly those with dementia. Would you consider coming to play for them? Just once a week, maybe once a month. Whatever you can manage." Margaret thought about it. About sitting in a hospital, playing for people who were sick, people who were dying. It sounded sad, hard, but then she thought about Frank's face, about Mrs. Henderson's tears, about the woman who told her that music was the only thing that brought her husband back. "I'll think about it," Margaret said. Dr. Williams smiled. "That's all I ask." He handed her a business card. "Call me when you're ready." The rest of the day was chaos. More reporters came, more cameras. A music producer from Nashville called and left a message about making a record. A publisher called about writing a book. A motivational speaking agency called about doing a tour. Margaret did not return any of the calls. That evening, she sat in her apartment with all the lights off, just sitting in the dark, thinking. Her whole life had been quiet, predictable, safe. She worked at the diner. She came home. She watched TV. She went to bed. That was her life, but now everything was changing. And she did not know if she wanted it to change. She did not know if she was ready. Her phone buzzed. A text message from Lisa. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You're doing something amazing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Margaret stared at the message for a long time. Then she got up and turned on a light. She walked over to her piano and sat down. She played quietly, just for herself, the waltz her grandmother taught her, the folk songs her father sang, the hymns her mother hummed, and as she played, she thought about all those faces, all those people who came just to remember, just to feel young again, just to hold on to something beautiful for a few minutes. Maybe change was not so bad. Maybe it was time for her life to be different. Maybe it was time to do something that mattered. Margaret kept playing, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of crowds and cameras and constant noise. The diner had become a tourist attraction. People came from other cities, other states, just to hear Margaret play. Mr. Patterson had to hire 2 more waitresses just to keep up with the business. Margaret played outside every morning now. Rain or shine, cold or warm. At 8:15 exactly, she sat down at the piano on the sidewalk and played for 20 minutes. Sometimes she played longer if her fingers were not too cold or too tired. The crowds never got smaller. If anything, they got bigger. The city had to send police officers to manage traffic. They blocked off the street during her performance. Store owners complained at first, but then they realized that all these people spent money. They bought coffee. They shopped. They ate lunch. The whole neighborhood was busier because of Margaret's piano. Frank still came every morning. He brought his folding chair now and set it up right next to the piano. He became a regular fixture. People took photos with him. They asked him about that first day. He told the story over and over, never getting tired of it. "She saved my life," he told a reporter from a magazine. "I was just waiting to die, just going through the motions. But her music reminded me why life is worth living. It brought back Rose, not physically, but in my heart. And that's where she belongs." Margaret heard him say this. It made her cry. She cried a lot these days. Happy tears, sad tears, overwhelmed tears. She was not used to feeling so much. One morning after her performance, Dr. Williams approached her again. She had been thinking about his offer, about playing at the hospital. She had been too scared to call him, too uncertain. "Ms. Chen," he said, "I don't mean to pressure you, but I wanted you to meet someone." He gestured to a woman standing behind him. She was about 75, small and thin, with white hair pulled back in a bun. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. "This is Helen," Dr. Williams said gently. "She has advanced Alzheimer's. She doesn't recognize her own daughter anymore. She doesn't speak much. She lives in a care facility. But her daughter Sarah brings her here every morning to hear you play." A younger woman stepped forward. She had tears in her eyes. "You don't understand what your music does for my mother. When you play, she's there. Really there. She holds my hand. She smiles. Sometimes she even hums along. It's the only time I get my mother back, even just for a few minutes." Margaret looked at Helen. The woman was staring at nothing. Her face was blank, empty. But then Margaret started humming one of the songs she usually played. Just humming it softly. "Beautiful Dreamer," Helen's head turned. Her eyes focused. She looked right at Margaret. And then, in a thin, wavering voice, she began to sing. "Beautiful dreamer, wake unto me. Starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee." Her daughter gasped. "Mom, Mom!" Helen kept singing. Just that one verse. But she sang it clearly. The words were right there, still in her brain, waiting for the music to unlock them. When she finished, Helen's eyes went distant again. She stopped singing. She was gone again, back to wherever she went in her mind. But her daughter was crying. "Thank you," she said to Margaret. "Thank you so much. She hasn't sung in 3 years. I thought I'd never hear her voice again." Margaret felt something crack open in her chest. A wall she had built a long time ago. A wall that kept her safe but also kept her from feeling too much. She turned to Dr. Williams. "I'll come to the hospital." "Tell me when." Dr. Williams smiled. "Thursday afternoon." "After your shift?" "Thursday afternoon," Margaret agreed. That Thursday, Margaret drove to the university hospital. It was a big building, white and clean and intimidating. She carried a folder of sheet music even though she had most of the songs memorized. It made her feel more professional, more prepared. Dr. Williams met her in the lobby. "Thank you for coming. The patients are excited." "Well, as excited as they can be. Some of them don't really understand what's happening. But we told their families and they're excited." He led her through long hallways that smelled like antiseptic and old flowers. They took an elevator to the 4th floor, the neurology ward, where people with dementia and Alzheimer's stayed. The recreation room was set up with chairs in a semicircle. About 20 people sat there, some in wheelchairs, some with walkers nearby, all of them old, all of them lost in their own ways. Families stood behind them, children, grandchildren, spouses. They all looked tired, sad, hopeful. A small keyboard was set up in front. Not a real piano. Margaret felt disappointed. The sound would not be the same. But it would have to do. She sat down at the keyboard. She looked at the faces in front of her. Some people looked at her. Some looked at nothing. Some had their eyes closed already. Margaret took a deep breath and began to play. She started with the waltz, her grandmother's song. The notes filled the room, soft and gentle, simple and pure. She watched what happened. A man in the front row began to cry, quietly, tears just running down his face. He did not wipe them away. He just let them fall. A woman in a wheelchair started rocking back and forth, not in a distressed way, in a soothed way, like a mother rocking a baby. An old man reached for his wife's hand. She took it. They sat there holding hands, both of them with their eyes closed. Margaret played song after song. Scarborough Fair, Greensleeves, Amazing Grace, You Are My Sunshine, Down by the Riverside. Songs that had been around for generations. songs that lived in the deepest parts of memory. And with each song, she saw small miracles. A woman who had not spoken in months whispered, "Mother used to sing that." A man who could not remember his own name hummed along to, "When Irish eyes are smiling." A woman with vacant eyes suddenly smiled. Really smiled. With joy. Margaret played for 40 minutes. Much longer than her usual 20. She could not stop. Every time she saw a response, every time someone came back even a little bit, she kept going. When she finally stopped, the room was silent. But it was a different kind of silence than when she started. This silence felt full, complete, like something important had happened. A man in his 50s approached her. He had been standing behind an elderly woman in a wheelchair. "My mother hasn't recognized me in 2 years," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Just now when you played Danny Boy, she looked at me. Really looked at me. And she said, 'That's your father's favorite song.' She knew me. For just a moment she knew me." Margaret did not know what to say. She just nodded. Other family members came up to thank her, to shake her hand, to hug her. They told her stories about their loved ones, about what the music meant to them. Dr. Williams pulled her aside. "Do you understand what you just did? You gave these people back to their families, even just for a moment. That's extraordinary." Margaret felt exhausted, emotionally drained, but also full, like she had just done the most important thing she had ever done in her life. "Can I come back?" she asked. "Anytime you want," Dr. Williams said. "As often as you want. We need you." Margaret started going to the hospital every Thursday. After her morning shift at the diner, she drove to the hospital and played for the patients. Word spread. Other facilities heard about her. Nursing homes, assisted living centers. They all wanted her to come play. She could not go to all of them. There were too many, so she started teaching others how to do it. One Saturday morning, she held a workshop at the community center. 15 people showed up. Most of them were musicians, piano teachers, guitar players. Some were music therapists. They wanted to learn what Margaret was doing so they could do it too. Margaret felt strange teaching. She was not a teacher. She was just a waitress who played piano. But she tried her best. "It's not about being perfect," she told them. "It's not about playing complicated pieces or showing off your skills. It's about simplicity, about playing the songs that people know, songs from their childhood, songs that feel like home." She demonstrated on the piano, playing simple melodies, explaining why she chose them. Songs from the 1930s and 40s work well for people in their 80s and 90s. Songs from the 1950s and 60s work well for people in their 70s. You have to know your audience. Know what era they grew up in. What songs would have been playing on the radio when they were young. One woman raised her hand. She was about 30 with kind eyes. "What if I don't know those old songs?" "Learn them," Margaret said simply. "There are books, videos, ask the families. They'll tell you what their loved ones used to listen to. Do the research. Make it personal." Another person asked, "What about people who were never musical? Will it still work for them?" "Everyone has music in them," Margaret said. "Even if they never played an instrument or sang in a choir. Music is universal. It's part of being human. You'll reach them. Maybe not right away, maybe not with the first song or the second, but you'll find the right melody eventually, the one that unlocks their memories." The workshop went for 3 hours. By the end, Margaret was exhausted but satisfied. These people would go out and play for others. They would spread the music. She could not be everywhere, but they could. That evening, she got a call from a number she did not recognize. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Ms. Chen? This is Patricia Morrison. I'm a producer for the Today Show. We'd love to have you on the program. We think your story is incredible and our viewers would love to meet you." Margaret's heart sank. She had been avoiding the big media requests, the national television shows, the magazine interviews. She did not want that kind of attention. She just wanted to play piano for people who needed it. "I don't think so," Margaret said. "I'm not really comfortable with that kind of thing." "I understand," Patricia said smoothly. "But think about the good you could do. If you came on the show, you could talk about music therapy, about how music helps people with dementia. You could inspire others to do what you're doing. You could reach millions of people." Margaret thought about that, about reaching millions of people, about spreading the message that music matters, that simple things can be powerful, that it is never too late to use your gifts. Let me think about it, Margaret said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Miss Chen, the world needs to hear your message. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Margaret hung up and sat on her couch. She thought about everything that had happened in the past month. How her life had turned upside down. How she had gone from being invisible to being seen. How scary it was, but also how good it felt. Her phone buzzed. A text from Frank. He had learned to text recently. His granddaughter taught him. The text said, "You changed my life. Let yourself be changed too." Margaret stared at those words for a long time. She thought about the person she used to be. The person who had given up her dreams. Who settled. Who let life happen to her instead of making choices. Who played it safe because taking risks was too scary. But that person was gone now. Or at least that person was changing. Becoming someone new. Someone who took chances. Someone who said yes instead of no. Someone who believed she had something to offer the world. Margaret picked up her phone and called Patricia Morrison back. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it. I'll come on your show." Patricia sounded thrilled. "Wonderful. We'll have our team reach out to arrange everything. This is going to be amazing." After she hung up, Margaret sat in the quiet of her apartment. She was scared. Terrified, actually. But she was also excited, ready. She walked to her piano and sat down. She played the waltz, her grandmother's song, the song that started everything, and as she played, she thought about her grandmother, a woman who had survived wars and poverty and heartbreak, a woman who never gave up, a woman who taught Margaret that music was not just notes on a page. It was life. It was memory. It was love. "Thank you," Margaret whispered to the empty room, to her grandmother wherever she was. "Thank you for teaching me this song." The notes floated through the apartment, simple and pure, full of hope and possibility. Outside, the street was dark, but inside there was light. There was music. There was a woman who had finally found her purpose, and that was everything. The Today Show wanted to fly Margaret to New York. She had never been to New York. She had barely left her small Midwestern town in 30 years. The thought of getting on a plane and flying across the country made her feel sick with anxiety, but she did it anyway. Lisa came with her. Her daughter took time off work to be there for support. It felt strange to Margaret, having her daughter take care of her. It was supposed to be the other way around. But Lisa insisted, "Mom, you're going on national television. You need someone with you. Let me do this." They flew out on a Tuesday evening. The airline bumped them to first class when they heard why Margaret was traveling. The flight attendants made a fuss over her. One of them had seen the video and cried when she recognized Margaret. "My grandmother has Alzheimer's," the flight attendant said. "Your story gives me hope." "Thank you." Margaret was not used to people thanking her. It still felt strange, like they had mistaken her for someone more important. They arrived in New York late at night. A car was waiting to take them to their hotel. Margaret pressed her face against the window, watching the city lights blur past. So many people, so many buildings, so much noise and movement and life. The hotel was fancy, too fancy. The room was bigger than her apartment back home. Lisa laughed at Margaret's expression. "Enjoy it, Mom, you deserve this," but Margaret could not relax. She kept thinking about the next morning, about sitting on a couch in front of cameras, about millions of people watching her, about what she would say. She barely slept. At 4 a.m, she gave up trying and sat by the window. The city was quieter now, but still alive. Even at this hour, cars moved through the streets. Lights glowed in windows. The city never completely stopped. Margaret thought about Frank, about Mrs. Henderson, about Helen and all the patients at the hospital. She thought about why she was really here. Not for fame, not for attention, but to tell people that music matters, that simple things have power, that it is never too late to make a difference. At 6 o'clock, a car picked them up and took them to the studio. Margaret wore a simple blue dress that Lisa had helped her pick out. Nothing fancy. She did not want to pretend to be someone she was not. The studio was chaos. People rushing around with clipboards and headsets. Bright lights everywhere. Cameras on wheeled platforms. It was overwhelming. A young woman with a clipboard found them. "Ms. Chen? I'm Ashley, one of the producers. Welcome, we're so excited to have you. Let me show you to makeup." Makeup. Margaret had not thought about that. She did not usually wear makeup. Maybe some lipstick on Sundays, But the makeup artist was kind. She chatted while she worked, making Margaret feel more comfortable. My mother loves your videos. She watches them every night before bed. Says they help her sleep. Says they remind her of being young. Everything reminded people of being young. That was the magic of the old songs. They were time machines. They transported people back to when life was simpler, when they were unbroken, when everything was still possible. At 7:45, Patricia Morrison came to meet her. She was polished and professional, with perfect hair and a confident smile. Margaret, thank you so much for coming. We're going to have a wonderful conversation. Just be yourself. Don't worry about the cameras. Pretend we're just two people talking over coffee. But it was impossible not to worry about the cameras. There were so many of them. And the lights were so bright. And there were so many people watching from the darkness beyond the stage. At 8 o'clock, they went live. Margaret sat on a cream-colored couch next to Patricia. Her hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap so no one would see. Patricia introduced her with the same words everyone had been using. The waitress who plays piano. The woman who makes people cry. The viral sensation. Margaret hated those words. They made her sound like a circus act. But when Patricia started asking questions, Margaret forgot about the cameras. She forgot about the millions of people watching. She just talked. She told them about Frank, about that first morning when he missed his wife and she wanted to help. She told them about the piano in the corner of the diner, about how her hands remembered the music even though she had not played in decades. Why did you stop playing? Patricia asked. Margaret thought about how to answer. Life got in the way. I had responsibilities. Bills to pay, children to raise. There was no time for music, no time for dreams, so I put them away in a box and forgot about them. And what made you open that box again? Frank's sadness, Margaret said simply. I saw his pain and I wanted to help. And the only thing I had to offer was music. I didn't think it would be enough. But it was, Patricia leaned forward. Your story has touched millions of people. Why do you think that is? Margaret thought carefully. I think people are lonely. I think they've forgotten how to connect with each other. We're all so busy, so distracted, so caught up in our own lives. But music cuts through all that. Music brings us back to what matters, to memory, to love, to the moments that made us who we are. Patricia nodded. You've started working with dementia patients. Tell us about that. Margaret's face softened. Those patients, they've lost so much. They don't recognize their own children sometimes. They can't remember where they live or what year it is. Everything is gone, except the music. The music stays, and when they hear the right song, they come back, just for a moment. But that moment means everything to their families. What would you say to someone watching who has a loved one with dementia? Margaret looked directly at the camera, at all those people out there in living rooms and kitchens across the country. Play them music, not just any music, the music from their youth. The songs they sang when they were young. Find out what they loved and play it for them. You might be surprised what comes back. And even if nothing comes back, the music still matters. It still reaches them somewhere deep inside where they're still whole. The interview went on for 15 minutes. At the end, Patricia had a surprise. Margaret, we'd like you to play something for us now. We have a piano right here. They wheeled out a beautiful grand piano, shiny and black and perfect. Margaret's breath caught. She had never played on a piano like that. The one at the diner was old and beaten and out of tune. Her piano at home was not much better, but this was a real instrument. She sat down at the bench. The keys were smooth and even, perfectly tuned. When she pressed down on them, the sound that came out was pure and rich and beautiful. She played the waltz. Her grandmother's song, the song that started everything. The studio was silent except for the music. Margaret closed her eyes and played from her heart. She played for Frank, for Helen, for every lonely person who needed to remember that they were still alive, still here, still capable of feeling. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the studio erupted in applause, the crew, the producers, Patricia, even the camera operators were clapping. Margaret opened her eyes and saw that Patricia was crying. Actually crying. Her perfect makeup was running. That was beautiful, Patricia said, her voice thick. Thank you for sharing that with us. After the show, Margaret and Lisa went back to the hotel. Margaret felt wrung out, empty. She had given everything she had in that interview. She did not know if she had said the right things or if she had helped anyone. But then her phone started buzzing. Text messages, emails, calls, all from people who had watched the show. Her son Michael sent a long text. "Mom, I just watched you on TV. I never knew you felt that way. About giving up your dreams. About putting your music away. I'm sorry I never asked. I'm sorry I took you for granted. You're amazing. I'm proud to be your son." Margaret cried reading that. She and Michael had never been close. He was always angry at her for divorcing his father. He blamed her for breaking up the family even though David was the one who left. But maybe now things could be different. Friends from high school messaged her. People she had not spoken to in 40 years. They remembered her playing piano in school concerts. They remembered how talented she was. They were glad she had found her way back to music. But the messages that meant the most came from strangers. People with parents who had dementia. People who were lonely. People who had given up their own dreams and felt inspired to try again. One message said, "I'm 78 years old. I stopped painting when I got married 50 years ago. My husband said it was a waste of time. He's gone now, but I never picked up a brush again until I watched you today. I'm going to start painting again. Thank you for showing me it's not too late." Another said, "My mother has Alzheimer's. She doesn't know me anymore. But I played her the song you played today, and she smiled. She actually smiled. I haven't seen her smile in 6 months. You gave me my mother back for a moment. I will never forget that." Margaret read message after message, tears streaming down her face. She had not known. She had not understood how far her music had reached, how many lives it had touched. Over the next few weeks, Margaret's life changed even more. She recorded an album, not with a big fancy studio, just her playing the old piano at the diner. She called it Songs for Remembering. All the profits went to Alzheimer's research and music therapy programs. The album became a surprise hit. Not on the pop charts, but it sold hundreds of thousands of copies. People bought it for their elderly parents, for nursing homes, for anyone who needed to remember. Margaret hired a manager, a kind woman named Sarah who understood that this was not about fame. It was about helping people. Sarah set up a non-profit organization called Music in Memory. They trained volunteers all over the country to do what Margaret did, to play simple songs for people who needed them. Nursing homes started music programs. Senior centers bought keyboards. Churches held music sessions for elderly members. The movement spread. Margaret never left the diner. She still showed up for her morning shift at 6. Still poured coffee for the regulars. Still played piano at 8:15 every morning on the sidewalk outside. That was her anchor. Her reminder that this was not about being special. It was about service. Frank was still there every morning too, sitting in his folding chair next to the piano. He became part of the show. People came just to see him, to hear him tell his story. He loved it. It gave him purpose again. One morning, 6 months after that first day, Margaret arrived at the diner to find something new. A small plaque on the wall next to where the piano used to sit. Before they moved it outside, it read, "Music lives here. May it bring you home to yourself." Mr. Patterson stood next to it looking proud. "I had it made." Seemed appropriate. Margaret touched the plaque, traced the letters with her finger. "It's perfect." That day after her morning performance, a young woman approached her. She looked about 25. She had a guitar case on her back. "Ms. Chen, my name is Emily. I'm a music therapist. I went back to school because of you. I was working in marketing. Hated it, but I always loved music. When I saw your story, I realized I was living someone else's life. So I quit my job, went back to school, and now I work at a nursing home. I play guitar for the residents, and I see what you see, the way they come alive, the way the music brings them back. I wanted to thank you. You changed my life." Margaret hugged her. This young woman who had found her purpose, who had been brave enough to change. "Thank you for telling me," Margaret said. "This is what it's all about. Not the videos or the interviews or the fame. This, people helping people, music connecting us." Emily nodded. "I brought some friends. Other music therapists. We were hoping you'd let us play with you sometime. Make it bigger. Reach more people," and that's what they did. Every Friday morning became a special event. Margaret played piano. Emily played guitar. Other musicians joined in. Violin, harmonica, accordion. They played the old songs together. The diner's sidewalk became a place of joy, of memory, of community. 1 year after that first day, the mayor gave Margaret a key to the city. She felt ridiculous accepting it. She was just a waitress. But Frank made her do it. "You deserve to be honored," he said firmly. "You've made this town better. You've made the world better. Accept it with grace." So she did. She stood at City Hall and accepted the key. She gave a short speech about music and memory and never giving up on your dreams. People applauded. The local high school band played. It was a good day. That evening, Margaret went home to her apartment. She made herself a simple dinner. Soup and bread. She ate while watching the news. Just a normal evening. Just a normal life. But then she walked to her piano. The piano that had been silent for so many years. The piano that was now played every day. She sat down and played. Not for an audience. Not for people with dementia. Not for cameras or crowds. Just for herself. Just for the pure joy of making music. And as she played, she thought about her life. About the road not taken. About the dreams she had given up. About the years she spent just surviving instead of living. She could not get those years back. They were gone. But she had now. She had today. She had the music that still flowed through her fingers. She had purpose and meaning and people who needed what she could offer. It was not the life she had imagined when she was young. When she auditioned for Juilliard. When the whole world seemed full of possibilities. But it was a good life. Maybe even better than what she had dreamed. Because this life was about more than her. It was about others. About giving. About using her gifts to bring light into dark places. Margaret played until her fingers ached. Then she played a little more. Because she could. Because the music was there. Because she had finally learned that it was never too late. Never too late to start again. Never too late to matter. Never too late to be who you were always meant to be. Outside her window, the street grew quiet. Lights went off in neighboring apartments. The world settled into sleep. But in Margaret's apartment, there was music. Simple melodies that had been played for generations. Songs that would be played for generations more. Songs that would help people remember. Songs that would bring people home to themselves. And that was everything. That was enough. That was more than enough. Margaret Chen, 63 years old, waitress and pianist, played until the last notes faded into the night. Then she closed the lid of her piano gently, carefully, like you close something precious. She stood up and looked at the piano, at the keys that had been silent for so long, at the instrument that had finally found its voice again. "Thank you," she whispered, to the piano, to her grandmother, to the universe, to whatever force had given her this second chance. Then she turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow she would wake up early. She would go to the diner. She would pour coffee and serve breakfast. And at 8:15 she would play again, because that was her life now. That was her purpose. And she would not trade it for anything in the world. The music would continue. The memories would continue. The healing would continue. And Margaret would be there with her simple melodies and her faithful heart, helping people find their way back home. One song at a time.